Facebook page or
That's my Facebook page.
where you?
I work for I have my own personal news. My name's Jared Rippin, but I know about 14 stations.
You from
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Carrie Blanchard, and I am the Library Director of Wilson County Public Library. I'm just going to give a little fill-in about what's going on tonight, and then we'll get started. So, thank you for coming to our first candidate forum of 2024, hosted by the library in partnership with the Wilson Times. Corey Friedman, editor of the Wilson Times, will serve as our moderator. I would like to thank our candidates as well for being here and for your desire to serve or to continue to serve the people of Wilson County. Tonight, and for 2 additional Thursday nights, October 17th and 24th, we will have an opportunity to listen and learn from the candidates in contested races. We invite you to ask questions by writing them down and submitting them to our panel, or by raising your hand to have them collected. Questions will be reviewed for clarity and duplicates by our panel and submitted to the moderator to ask the questions. This is a nonpartisan event. Candidates from both parties, as well as independent candidates, were invited to each event. Some will not be able to attend due to prior commitments, which in no way reflects upon their commitment to the citizens of Wilson County. This is an opportunity to engage in civil discourse, and so we ask that you refrain from demonstrating your approval or disapproval of what you might hear tonight. And we ask for the same of our candidates. Our goal tonight is to listen and learn with courtesy and respect for everyone here. As a public library, we have high standards for customer conduct enforced by our customer conduct policy. Finally, some housekeeping. Bathrooms and water fountains are across the hall. After 8 p.m., you may exit the building directly to the left of the assembly room doors. Don't hesitate to ask our security guard if you need help to your car. Voter registration forms are available at the back if you would like to register to vote, as well as more question forms, pens, clipboards for writing and information about upcoming events. We may not have time for additional questions at the end because we've had so many questions tonight submitted. So I just want to let everybody know we have a large volume. We'll see what we can get through. I want to thank our candidates once again for coming tonight during what must be a very busy time for everyone. Thank you. Now welcome our moderator, Corey Friedman, to the podium.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to Mr. Fontenot and Mr. Pittman. I've gotten the chance to speak with both of you, and I'm just so encouraged to see the turnout here. We definitely have a lot of interest in this contest, and we're going to go straight into the audience questions because we do want to get to as many of them as possible. At some point, I may take the liberty of combining a couple of related questions just for ease of getting through the order. So what we'll do is just alternate. First, Mr. Fontenot will respond, and then Mr. Pittman. And then on the next question, Mr. Pittman will go first, and then Mr. Fontenot. Even though we have 2 microphones, it's just an easy way to keep track of it, and that way everyone has a chance to go first, everyone has a chance to go last, just keep it fair. So our first audience question this evening. Please share how your experiences in this community have shaped your policies. How do you plan to connect with the community? Mr. Fontenot.
So, one of the reasons I moved to Wilson is I grew up in a small town, kind of like this. My mother was a single mother, and most of my friends were raised, like I was raised by women. We lived in poverty. We all had a public education. And like many here, we had politicians who made promises that they never kept. So one of the ways that my policies connect with this community is that I promised 2023 when I was elected that I would come back to you with results. These are those results. Wilson County has received $78 million in one-time funding. Your legislator has been on 15 bills as a primary, 3 of them in education. Education funding has received $100,000 for the gentleman's agreement, $400,000 for security, an average of $2,000 teacher pay raise, taking you from $39,000 to $41,000. In addition to that, $1.2 billion in Tier 1 school construction. Lastly, our community, our young people, deserve good paying jobs. We, through the $30 million we brought into our biotech center, have been able to have 2 company expansions, 4 life science projects, 5 new companies come in, 1,368 jobs, to a total of $671 million of outside investment. And this Tuesday, after 11:30, that number will change dramatically. Keep tuning into the news.
All right, same question, Mr. Pittman, please share how your experiences in this community have helped shape your policies and how you plan to connect with the community.
Certainly. Well, good evening to everybody. It's so good to see such a full room. This is a really important race. As most of you know, this is a race that no matter which side of the aisle you sit on, this race will directly impact what the state legislature looks like. So I'm proud to see such a full room. I do want to make a note, though, that we need to keep in mind that we have a storm that's coming up, and I want to make sure everyone is prepared. We need to pray for the folks to the south of us and the folks to the west, because we never know what could come up with these storms. Last time around, we didn't think it was going to be all that big, and then Springfield took a big hit, but we saw the community rally on it. So my name is Dante Pittman. I'm running for the North Carolina House because this community raised me up. I was born and raised to a single mother, and I watched her work 2 and 3 jobs to make sure that we can make ends meet. And because of this community, because of strong teachers, because of good coaches, and because of a strong faith community, preachers and pastors that took an interest in me, I was able to rise up and I was able to accomplish some things because of this community. I'm a captain in the North Carolina National Guard, something I'm really proud of. I'm your board chair for the Wilson County Department of Social Services, and in total I've served on over 10 different community boards. But we're not here tonight to talk about what I've done or what anybody has done. We're here to talk about what we need to get done. We're here to talk about making sure we have strong education, making sure that public schools are something that exists here in this community, making sure, in my opinion, that we stop $500 million being placed into private school vouchers so that no school, whether they're urban or rural, misses out on the opportunity to grow and thrive. We want to make sure we have quality health care access across this community, and we want to make sure that we have good jobs and that small business owners can thrive here in Wilson. I see my time's coming short, Corey, so I'm going to stop right there.
All right. That was well timed. We will stick with you for our next question. This is a combined audience question. What is your position on the abortion issue, and do you have a number of weeks in mind before it is not allowed by North Carolina law? And is the 12-week abortion ban in North Carolina enough, or should it go further to protect the unborn?
So I will share with you all that just this week I had the opportunity to have a roundtable discussion. We had between 30 and 40 women that came together. We had some panelists, some doctors, and we listened to folks in the community to hear what was important to them and to learn about what's at stake in this election. I will tell you that I'm really concerned about where we are going in North Carolina with the current law. We've heard that not only is the 12-week abortion ban what we have, we've heard from leaders, including Mark Robinson, that has said that it doesn't go far enough. That he even said, this is a man running for governor, and our legislature is completely in line with him. He has said that if he had his way, there would be no exceptions. Folks, we are talking about meaning in cases of rape or incest, no exceptions. That's not acceptable. I will tell you that I do have to say that I differ with my opponent in that I also don't believe abortion is genocide. That's not the kind of language we need to be using when talking about these issues. There are good people on both sides of these issues. When you use that kind of rhetoric, it divides folks. So I don't believe in those kinds of comparisons. I don't believe that Mark Robinson and his view when it comes to the legislature represents who we are as North Carolina. I would tell you, as someone who was raised by strong women, who is educated by strong women, we need to trust them.
Mr. Fontenot, the question is what is your position on the abortion issue? Do you have a number of weeks in mind? And is the 12-week abortion ban enough, or should it go further to protect the unborn?
Awesome. Thank you. I think one thing I love about numbers is numbers don't lie. For instance, currently, the African American family is about 15% of the United States population. Yet federally, 2022, the Biden administration released a statistic that 49% of all abortions take place with black people. If that is not genocide, I don't know what is. Furthermore, I don't know why we're surprised. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, even Planned Parenthood said, was a white supremacist who thought that eugenics were the key to controlling the black population. Since 1972, the black family was supposed to be, per capita with a large birth rates, one of the largest populations in America. We have become the smallest, and we are continuing to shrink. Do not talk of justice when Planned Parenthood places their slaughter clinics in poor neighborhoods where young girls are deceived into doing things that they probably don't completely understand. And let's not forget the mental health trauma and crisis that is taking place in our nation of young women who tell me, I can hear my baby cry. I wish I could hold my baby today. What would my baby be right now? How old would my baby be? And not just young women, young men who currently have no right to this. The bottom line is, ladies and gentlemen, numbers don't lie. History doesn't lie. And for anybody here that wants to tout this racial rhetoric of justice, it is one of the greatest injustices to ever touch the black community, and it is a disgrace.
Thank you.
Public schools across the state are suffering due to a significant lack of funding. What's your stance on private school vouchers, and do the vouchers have to come at the expense of K-12 district schools?
So this is a topic I'm really passionate about because I have 7 college degrees, all from public schools. I taught in public school and was nominated Teacher of the Year. My young people excel. I hear all the time, vouchers steal from public schools. Okay, well let's look at, again, the numbers. Washington, D.C. has no vouchers and has the highest per capita spending rate per student at $20,000 per student on average. And you know what you still find in Washington, D.C.? The poorest and worst schools are in black and brown neighborhoods, just like in Wilson County. So people say, if you get rid of vouchers, that fixes. Well, what about Chicago? Where again, there are no vouchers, and yet the worst neighborhoods are in black and brown neighborhoods. Let's take that further. Let's not just stop there. Let's consider this. What happens to a child who, say, maybe he's in Darton where he doesn't have a math teacher? Because maybe Nash County, because of their county commissioners, is receiving a 12% supplement, and therefore most of our teachers go there. Because it's funded at the state and county level. We can, like we did, give a $2,000 raise, but if the county commissioners don't pony up on the stipend, we look uncompetitive. So what I say is vouchers is a racial equalizer. Because no child of any color should have to be stuck in a school that is failing because it fits their zip code. That's called the ghetto system. They had it in Germany. Every child should be able to get the education they deserve no matter what. If the school cannot fit the bill, that child should immediately be sent to a school that can.
Yes.
And the same question for Mr. Pittman. Public schools across the state are suffering due to a significant lack of funding. What is your stance on private school vouchers? And do you feel that public education is not deserving of those funds?
Well, first, I do just want to clarify one thing on the last question. I do want to point out that when President Obama was president, we actually saw the number of abortions decrease in this country. And you do it through making sure there are good contraceptions, you have good, strong community programs. You don't do it by restricting someone's freedom. But when it comes to education, I will tell you that what I know about education here in this community, and I've been involved with Wilson Education Partnership, and one of the things that we work on is making sure we are supporting our teachers. We're connecting business leaders to our classrooms and making sure that we have the best schools possible. You know, we just found out that Rock Ridge Elementary School was named a National Blue Ribbon School. And if that wasn't good enough for Wilson County Schools, the year before, Blue Comma Elementary School. And I would also need to point out that Sally B. Howard here in this community was named a National Blue Ribbon School. So we do have good schools. We just need to make sure we are supporting our educators. And I just have to mention that $500 million being taken out of public schools. What that could do, we could do with that money is 8.5% teacher raises. We can make sure there's a school counselor in every school to help address mental health issues. We could get 26,000 4-year-olds into pre-K. And for those that don't know the history of education here in Wilson County, we have a strong leader, former Governor Hunt, known as the education governor, who 20 years ago pointed out the importance of getting our children started earlier in the classroom, making sure that when they get to elementary school, they are happy, healthy, and ready to learn. So we've got to focus on coming together, not taking money out of the system to give to wealthy families in Raleigh and Charlotte. You know, you could kind of squint in those communities and see how vouchers might work. But when you're talking about giving money in a rural county with no income cap to millionaires and billionaires in North Carolina, I don't understand that.
Mr. Pittman also receives our next question. It's a related question on the topic of education. What are some ways to address the increase in student behavioral health needs?
Well, I just mentioned one of them. That's to make sure that we have a school counselor in every school. Right now, our school counselors are spread so thin that we don't have the resources that we need to address these issues. And every time that we hear about an unfortunate circumstance or an event that takes someone's life, we're always told we need to focus on mental health. I believe it's time to put our money where our mouth is as a state. We need to fund these resources, and we need to make sure we keep our commitment to our students and our educators. And I also have to address something that's been going around in the mail that I found from the North Carolina Republican Party suggesting that I don't support school resource officers. Nothing could be further from the truth. And if you don't believe me, I would mention to you that right now our human relations director, the one that followed me in that position, Billy Woodard, was my school resource officer. He has known me since I was 5 and 6 years old. And one of the things that I will tell you is that we know making sure we have good systems in place, we have people in our schools that care, and that we have the resources that we need. That's how we build better schools. It's not by waving the white flag on public education.
And the same question for Mr. Fontenot. What are some ways to address the increase in student behavioral health needs in our schools?
Going back to the idea of results, not promises, one of the greatest accomplishments of the North Carolina legislature that I was actually able to speak about would be the expansion of Medicaid, which brought in $1.8 billion into our system, $600 million of which have been allocated to mental health resources in public schools. We are currently working with several nonprofits in the Raleigh, Wake Forest area that will be subsidizing mental health care to put a counselor in every school by, surprise, surprise, doing what our WASH clinic does, and that is using Medicaid, which is already available. Why try to create another pot of funding when you already have it? And that being said, I am currently working with our area health foundation to expand our WASH clinics so that instead of having one clinic per year in our community school concepts, we are looking at increasing that by 10 schools per year in our community schools, which is one of the exciting things that I really look forward to when it comes to public education. At Forest Hills, I got to see just how effective a WASH clinic can be, and I am a huge proponent of it. So when I look at the situation here, I don't think it's an either or, and I don't think somebody has to lose in order to win. I think it's ridiculous. There's plenty of money to go around. We thankfully have Medicaid in this state, and it's for everyone. And one of the great things about it is that our school people will benefit, and they are benefiting. And lastly, I would say this, one other way we can help with mental health in school is the return of discipline. Currently, and it won't be for long, it is illegal to expel a student even for death threats. It is illegal to expel a student for chronic bullying or assault, even violent assault. Let me say this, what do we expect our student health to be when you have to be in the same classroom with someone who just cursed out the teacher and is cursing you out too? That's nonsense, and it's going to change.
We'll also receive our next question. What would you propose the government do to remedy the issue of homelessness in our community? Is there a role for the General Assembly to play in combating homelessness?
So when I think about homelessness, I think about my experience working with the Durham Rescue Mission, which is one of my favorite places to work in Wilson. I've been fortunate to work with them since I've been here. And one thing I realized is that when we look at these ideas, the solutions must be multifaceted. For instance, part of homelessness is we, unfortunately, in the 1980s, the government struck down our mental health care system, and there's a lot of people on the street who are mentally ill. So therefore, we need to connect them with Medicaid resources, which is Durham Rescue Mission. When you check in, you get your Medicaid, part of the program. Really great idea. Not only that, we need to provide the avenue for which we do not only treat mental illness, but we rehabilitate vocationally. The legislature has actually implemented a bill returning vocational trades to colleges and high schools. And lastly, we need to also provide economic opportunities and jobs that are worthwhile and lasting. One of the most exciting things about my job so far has been bringing in large industries, much like the one you will hear about next Tuesday at 11:30 at the Wilson Economic Development Center. That will provide salary-level jobs for high school graduates. One of the worst initiatives in our K-12 system is the college-only track, which has failed because 60% of our students drop out in their freshman year. Well, thankfully, we changed that to the 3E track. Enlistment into the military, which is a phenomenal place for all people. Not only that, education for those that do want to go to college, and then not only that, employment for those that would like to move directly into the job market. So, that being said, I think it's a multifaceted approach. I think it can be done, and I think we need to do it on several levels. Woo!
What would you propose that the government do to remedy the issue of homelessness in our community?
So when I was the City of Wilson Human Relations Director, we were in charge of, we were the Fair Housing Office. What folks often got confused is they thought that meant we had local resources to help people in a pinch. I'll never forget that it was a Friday afternoon. We were getting ready to go home for the weekend, and we had a young mother that came in. She had 3 children, and they had no housing. She had a home, she was living in an apartment, and then she was forced out because she couldn't pay rent. One of the things we have got to focus on is making sure that we have solutions before folks get to crisis. We do have some really incredible people that work in crisis situations, like the Wilson Crisis Center, that help folks when they're in a pinch, but we need better policy. We've got to increase the supply of housing here in this community that's affordable, that will help prices come down. I believe that the state legislature has a role to play to help incentivize local governments to preserve and to make sure that our housing that's existing can be rehabilitated so that we have more offering. More supply is the key to making sure we see prices come down. But I did want to just address one thing that we had in the last question, and that was the topic of Medicaid expansion. I'll tell you, I'm really thankful that the state legislature finally passed Medicaid expansion after a decade. And I'm really glad that our representative voted for it. I was initially concerned because in 2018 he ran against it. But those of us that have been working in the community know how important these resources are. I will tell you that at the Department of Social Services, our folks have never been working harder because of Medicaid expansion. We've seen almost 10,000 people come on our rolls, but they tell me it's worthwhile because we need these resources in the community.
And Mr. Pittman will also be the first to answer our next question. This is a combined audience question. How have you collaborated with other political parties in the past? How have you worked together with people from the other side of the aisle?
Well, I think that is a wonderful question, because one of the reasons that I'm running in this race is that North Carolina is at its best when there's balance. Most of you already know this, but in the state of North Carolina, the General Assembly contains enormous power. And when you have one party that can just vote straight ticket and just have their way without having to speak to folks across the aisle, you have weaker solutions. So when I've been on various boards here in this community, whether it be OIC, Wilson Education Partnership, the Partnership for Children, we don't ask people what your party registration is. We don't care. We're interested in folks that want to solve problems in the community and that are interested in solutions. I would tell you, when I was working for the city of Wilson in our leadership team, we had folks that were across the aisle around that table. Nobody asked what your party affiliation was. All that they asked that you come with a commitment to making sure this community gets stronger. And if anybody ever wondered what the change would be if I were to be our next representative, I can promise you I will not vote 99% of the time with my party. I don't believe anyone is right 99% of the time.
And same question for Mr. Fontenot. How have you collaborated with other political parties in the past? And how have you worked together with people from the other side of the aisle?
Probably one of the things I love about my generation is that we're finally at the place where we're done with this idea of parties and we're looking at results. There are a lot of people like that. One of the biggest issues that I gotta say is heartbreaking in North Carolina. Could you imagine owning your house at age 65, you no longer have income, you're living off retirement, but the property taxes go up. You can't pay the bill, you're forced out. Well, I have the pleasure of working with Sarah Crawford, Democrat from Raleigh, on a veterans and seniors tax exclusion bill that will, when you're at age 65 in retirement, freeze your property taxes. And for veterans that are 100% disabled, they won't have property taxes at all. And for veterans under that, from 10% to 90%, they, at the same time, will have stair-step property taxes. But let's look at other things that I've been able to do bipartisanly. Medicaid expansion was a bipartisan bill. Teacher certification. Our teacher pipeline is one of the worst in the nation. And that's why our education system is suffering. It needs to change. Well, I authored an amendment that changed that certification process by removing the Praxis 2 for second-year students. And that was voted 110-1. We also need to regulate hemp. Young people are dying from gas station drugs. And that is a tragedy. Our hemp bill was unanimous on both sides. Why? Because it's bipartisan. House Bill 378, targeting embalming fluid in our community, unanimous. How about Call Me Mister? Another bill that will put blacks and browns in the classrooms, especially males, because statistically we know you put black men in classrooms, especially in poor neighborhoods, performance increases. Also bipartisan. There are your results.
We'll also receive our next question. This is a good one. Election season always gets pretty optimistic and generally full of promises. But if you should overpromise and underdeliver, how should your constituents hold you accountable?
Well, I would say perhaps one of the greatest things about, I feel fortunate in working in Wilson is that, first off, y'all are neighbors. I see every last one of you everywhere. And I've had the attitude that if you're going to stop to talk to me, I'm going to stop to talk to you unless it's a medical emergency and I can't. Or at every rally I've given out or went to, I give up my cell phone. Text me, we'll call, and I'll take you out to coffee. Why? Because I work for you. You don't work for me. My office is your office. It is not my office. Wilson County is ultimately what matters, and what I like about this is that we're so small, it is very easy to be kept accountable to what you said you're going to do. And in a case where you do the opposite, for instance, when I said I was going to vote against Medicaid, and then I voted for Medicaid, we have a really good newspaper that allowed me to write an article as to why I came to that difference of opinion. Because I learned some things that I previously did not know, which is part of what I consider to be good leadership. So I think accountability, first off though, is also a heart's desire and attitude. One of the things that I would say is a hallmark of my first 2 years is we clearly showed that this isn't about what party you're in. Our grants went to people of all parties. Our budgets went to the same way as far as what I had control over. And my time is the same. Because ultimately, I don't care what you call yourself. If I work for you, I work for you. I'm going to treat you with the respect you deserve. My sisters are Democrats. I have families that's Republican. Folks, all I got to say is I have a better value system than to base how much I like you on your political views. And for those that think your morality and your political views make you better than me or anyone else, you are sorely mistaken.
We will give the same question to Mr. Pittman. So election season always gets pretty optimistic and full of promises, but if you should happen to overpromise and underdeliver, how should your constituents hold you accountable?
Wilson County is a team. And one of the things that I've continued to hear in this community from folks on the school board, the county commission, city council, and our citizens, is that they get a little skeptical when one person or one group of people suggests that they have made everything happen. We've had good things that have been going on here, and it's taken some tough fights to get these things done. But one of the things that I've known since I was young and being raised in this community is that we work together. You know, when we're talking about what the people of Wilson County expect, I think they expect a leader that will listen. I think they expect a leader that is willing to work with anybody that comes in good faith to work. And I think that they expect we're going to be transparent. And I think that they expect the values we talk about here match our voting record when we are in the General Assembly. That's important to make sure we are transparent and that we are consistent. And so I know that there's some folks that feel as though, you know, there's one party or the other that looks down upon them. I'm not interested in that. Just the other day, we were knocking doors, and we went up to a door, and the man had a Trump flag. And we knocked on the door, had a conversation, he told me, he said, Dante, I'm voting for you. I'm voting for you because you have an extensive record in the community, and that's something I respect. We may not have, our ballots may not look the same, we may not agree on every issue, but that's what democracy looks like. So I'm here to tell all of you that I'm willing to work with anyone. I have a record of working with anyone, whether you are conservative, moderate, or liberal. Since before I was able to vote, before I registered to vote, I've always been a moderate Democrat. That's what I stand for. But I'm willing to meet anybody halfway if they have the best interest of this community.
Pittman will be the first to receive our next question. North Carolina is struggling with both teacher recruitment and retention. Teachers are leaving public education due to lack of respect, resources, support, and pay. If elected, how do you plan to improve teacher working conditions and pay?
Well, I guess I would say that, number one, when I hear that there's plenty of money to go around and that we can do both, my question is, why aren't we? You go when you meet with teachers, you visit classrooms, they don't feel like they're prioritized. They don't feel like we are on a trajectory to bettering our education system. And that responsibility lies with the General Assembly. In the state of North Carolina, it is the General Assembly's responsibility to make sure that teacher pay and pay of educators, whether they're principals, custodians, that's taken care of at the state level. Counties are mostly responsible for building and structures. So when our teachers are telling us we are not on a path to success in terms of pay, I think it's pretty clear where that responsibility lies. And it's really concerning to see how we've stepped back on this issue. I mean, when Governor Hunt left office, we were over. Well, I mention it because I think that it's important to have a history of where we've come from. If you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going. We have seen that we have been over half of teacher pay. We've been in the lower half. We've been 25th, 20th, and 21st. And so for us to be in the high 40s and fluctuate between the high and low 40s, it's unnecessary. It's completely unnecessary. We know how to do this in North Carolina, but we've got to get back to the basics. We've got to make sure that we're taking care of our teachers. We've got to make sure that we are incentivizing and getting people in the pipeline. There are some great programs across the state that are encouraging counties to get involved to make sure that there's a pipeline for local students to get into the local classrooms. And those are the things that we've got to focus on. But giving money away to wealthy families in Raleigh and Charlotte are not the path to prosperity.
Mr. Fontenot, teacher recruitment and retention. Teachers are leaving public education due to lack of respect, resources, support, and pay. If elected, how do you plan to improve teacher working conditions and pay?
Absolutely. So it's interesting, when you look at teacher resources, I would say, what do DC, New York, Chicago, and Wilson have in common? Not teacher pay, because the top three pay way more than we do. That's established. But you know what they all have in common? All of them are losing teachers in droves, even though the pay is much higher in DC, New York, and Chicago. Well, according to some of the teachers I spoke with, the number one issue is discipline. Number one. When I was at Forest Hills, we had a student tell a teacher to her face he was going to kill her and several other classmates. That student was suspended for 2 weeks. That is not just. That is not right. You should not have to be in the class with someone who said, and we see it carried out, that they're going to kill you. That makes no sense. I'm working to change that. By the way, I see that argument against this is supposed to be racial justice, and it's not, to create predatory environments where students are paired with people that are dangerous. That's wrong. Second thing is teacher pay, and that's why we moved it from $39,000 to $41,000 with the plan to get to $50,000 in the next 4 years. You will see it happen. And I'd like to note a falsehood, though, and that is the General Assembly alone influences teacher pay. That is clearly not true. Teacher pay is a combination of the General Assembly and the stipend provided by the county. Recently, our county was requested a 2% increase to go from 8% to 10%. It was denied. Now, who and what and why, I don't know. But I know that when you say if a certain party had control, they would do better, well, what does that look like when both the school board and the commissioners are controlled by one party, and yet they can't agree on 2% for a total of $600,000? It doesn't agree. That's what we need to do, and also give teachers resources and protection from blowback.
Woo!
And
We just need to remind everyone that we do need to be courteous in our responses and listening to everyone and not interrupting anyone. So we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
We're all here for the same purpose.
thanks to everyone for your cooperation, and we will stick with Mr. Fontenot for the next question. How do you intend to engage the Latino community, and why should Latino community members vote for you?
Well, I would say first and foremost, you engage them by making your time available when they want to talk. I had the opportunity. We are on different sides of the issue when it comes to HB 10 to engage with Casa Azul. But you know what? When they said they were at the building, I dropped what I was doing, made my way to my office, and I sat down and I listened. And I did my best to explain why I think their concerns may not come to fruition in the way that they feel. That's the first one. The second one I would say is flat out just going to meet people and being available for their community. One of the greatest things I had the opportunity to do this year was to give a graduation speech at Wilson Prep and Sally B. Howard in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish very well, but they understood that I cared, and that means a lot to me. I come from the south side of Chicago. My sisters are married to Puerto Ricans and Mexicans. That's a culture I grew up in, and it's one that I'm very passionate about, and that I love deeply and sincerely. And my hope is that they can look in my eyes and know that's true, that even if we disagree on something, I will do my best, no matter what, for that community, because they deserve it. Like everybody here deserves it. I don't care what you look like, you deserve my best effort. And even if I disagree with you, I'm never going to give you less than my best. That's not right. And I'm not going to do that. So I would say also to my Latino brothers and sisters and everyone else is we're all in this together. And one of my passions is to see people rise above where they're currently at. and I will do whatever it takes to see that rise happen.
Same question for Mr. Pittman. How do you intend to engage with the Latino community, and why should members of the Latino community vote for you?
Well, I will say that we're seeing Latino, the population of our Latino community rise in this community, and it's really good for Wilson County. You know, when we are talking about making sure that we have a community that invites anyone who is willing to come and to try to be successful and build a strong community, that's exactly what we have in mind. You know, when I was working for the city of Wilson, one of the things I was proud to be a part of was the police department's Hispanic Festival. Now, this is something that started before I was with the city of Wilson, but it's something that we joined together to help strengthen, because I believe everyone should have pride in their culture, and their community should be there to support them. That's what it's all about. There's room for all of us here in this community, but we've got to make sure we take steps to recognize people and to recognize what their situations are and what they're going through. But I did, again, just want to go back to one thing from the previous question, and that is to address what we're talking about with the state versus county supplement. Just ask the state chair of the Board of Education. The history of what we do in North Carolina is that the majority of the responsibility does fall on the state of North Carolina when it comes to salaries and teacher pay. The reason that counties are being asked to chip in is because we are not meeting that standard. So just because that's what we're doing now, that is not how it was designed, and we're asking counties, even rural counties that are in poverty, to come up with money that they do not have to make sure that we cover the tracks of the state. It's not appropriate and it's not right.
And our next question also goes to Mr. Pittman. I love this question. Whoever wrote it, I sense there's a budding political journalist out there. The question is, what is your ad campaign strategy? As you run for office, what's your strategy for your political ads?
Well, the strategy for my ads is to tell the truth. What we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that we get our message out there. One of the things I always tell folks is that I have confidence in our message and I have confidence in our people. What this election is about is whether we can get that message to our people. I have been around this community my entire life, and one of the things that I know is that during tough times and during tough situations, we come together. And that's what we're trying to do with this campaign. You know, I've heard from the audience and from certain folks that, you know, we need to stop trusting one party, and there seems to be one side that wants to talk all about party. I'm not interested in whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. What matters to me is whether you are interested in moving this community forward and making sure that we have a balanced state so we can continue to progress in North Carolina.
Amen.
So, when you're asking specifically about what we're doing, we're trying to make sure that we are getting everywhere that we can. That is including getting through mail. That's including being on digital ads. That's including we're trying to get on cable. Lord knows it's so expensive because we're so close to the Raleigh media market, but we're trying and we're continuing to work to make sure we can get that message out. We're also going door to door. You know, that I wouldn't call that so much an ad campaign strategy. It's the old-fashioned way of doing things, but there is nothing like meeting people where they are, and that's what we've tried to do throughout this campaign, and we're going to continue to do it for the next 40 days.
Mr. Fontenot, same question. What is your ad campaign strategy?
It started in 2018 when, first off, Wilson Times offered the letters to the editor where you can write in and just be very plain about where you're at. And I found that people really appreciated me saying very straightforward what I will, won't do, will, won't support, right out the outset. And I've stuck to that. And now I get the opportunity to write once a week or once every 2 weeks to go ahead and give legislative updates, because I think it's important that you know what's going on. So the first part of my ad campaign is where I say Amazon.com customer service. That is, whether you call my office, email my office, whether I see you in the community, we will solve whatever problem you have immediately, because you should not wait. And then we will come back to you and let you know how far we got with it. So I would say leveraging the newspaper. Another one will be social media. I really enjoy how you can create your own news how you can create your own content flow, and how you can really reach disparate groups of people across several different spectrums with your ideas, whether they agree or disagree. It's another way to just be transparent. The great thing about the 21st century, I heard a car salesman tell it, was that now more than ever, people have information that previously ambassador races didn't have. And I think that's an advantage, because no matter what is said, the record is there. You can go see it, you can check for yourself, and also check where it's at. And I really enjoyed that.
Thank
And Mr. Fontenot will also receive our next question. So an amendment to the 2023 state budget included an expansion of legislative privilege that allows each individual lawmaker to designate records as confidential. The 50 state senators and 120 representatives are no longer bound to follow the same public records law as local governments and state agencies, including the governor's office. Do you think that expansion went too far? And how would you handle public records requests knowing that you have unlimited discretion to turn material over or mark it private?
Yeah. So I would say the first thing I would share with the audience is that my biggest problem with the public records request is it became a weapon of warfare. Just because you had to previously, by law, respond, we got public records requests all the time. And the whole goal was to waste your time. First off, I can tell you, most of my correspondence is person to person. So when I had a public records request, there was nothing to give. So it was easy for me. But the fact that I had to continue to respond to people who are just really trying to deal with our time and trying to bury our time, I thought that was unfortunate and an abuse of, at the time, what was a privilege, which is why I supported it being labeled confidential. Because I saw firsthand how the public records request was used just as a weapon to antagonize people and waste public taxpayer money. Furthermore, whenever something is litigated, for instance, I've had legislation litigation right now, all my records are now public for that. The public records request does not make it off limits permanently for everyone. If it goes to court, it's on limits. It just makes it off limits to those that say, hey, I'd like to know. And to those that have abused that authority over the time. So I think I really enjoyed it. The fact that I haven't had to answer a bunch of nonsense and that I've been able to focus more on taking care of my constituents.
And Mr. Pittman receives the same question. Do you think the expansion of legislative privilege went too far, and how would you handle public records requests knowing that you had unlimited discretion?
Yes, I do think that it went too far. This is a transparency issue. And if nothing else, just in the last week, we have seen that elected leaders and folks in positions of authority need to be checked up on. I mean, in case somebody has been under a rock and hasn't seen it, our current lieutenant governor, it was unveiled, called himself a black Nazi. He said that he wanted to own slaves. He participated in transgender pornographic websites, but we're supposed to just take for granted what our elected officials say. It's an issue of transparency, and we've got to make sure that we can hold our elected officials accountable, anytime and not just during election season. Because for far too often, one of the things that we see is that we see folks raise all of this money, you see all of these attack ads that come from a state party, and they just try to tear down their opponent, and then after they've gotten office, we don't hear anything else from them again. And if for no other reason, like I said, just this week we have found that the second man in charge of state government, has called himself a black Nazi, and now we're seeing folks run away from it. We're even seeing now that there are folks on the other side of the aisle that we're supporting them that are taking a step back. Without transparent government, we cannot hold our elected officials accountable, and it's something that the people deserve, no matter how burdensome it is.
And our next question is for Mr. Pittman as well. What do you think are the major challenges for House District 24, and how would you rectify those challenges?
Well, we spend a good deal of time talking about education. That continues to be one of the significant challenges, but I would also extend it to pre-K education. I mentioned earlier that when we're talking about the $500 million that are being taken out of our public school system, I mentioned that we could put 26,000 4-year-olds into pre-K. For those that don't know, we've had an issue with the number of slots we've had here in this county. I used to serve on the Wilson County Partnership for Children, and one of the things that we had to tackle again and again is that the need was so great to make sure that our children got a good start in school, but we did not have the slots needed that come from the state of North Carolina. So we have got to place an emphasis and a focus on getting those children ready to learn so that they're not already behind when they get to elementary school. Another issue is healthcare access. Just last year, we saw Walgreens on the other side of town close down. And I was proud to be out there with the mayor, with Councilwoman Jalea Morgan, and other leaders in the community doing what we could do in signing petitions and trying to make sure the voice was heard that we need to have equitable access to prescription drugs in this community. We fell short, and I would have loved to have had some more legislative support in that because we beat it that one time before. A few years before that, we saw the same instance, but Congressman G.K. Butterfield got involved, and we were able to stop it that time. So one of the things we've got to continue to focus on in this community is make sure that we have quality, affordable health care access. Folks can access prescription drugs at an affordable rate, and they don't have to drive 10 to 15 minutes across town to get their prescription. It's a vital issue, not just for seniors in our community, but for everyone in our community.
And Mr. Fontenot, same question. What do you think are the major challenges for House District 24, and how would you rectify those challenges?
I love questions. Perhaps one of the most chilling questions I received from a mother was, Mr. Fontenot, why can't my son have justice? I have had to work with 7 women who all lost children to fentanyl. There are women here who lost their child to an overdose. That is an area where we as a community have clearly failed, and it needs to change. One of the ways that I've started remedying that change is House Bill 10. House Bill 10 forces sheriffs to cooperate with ICE for violent or known terrorist offenders. Because when we don't cooperate with law enforcement, those people really commit crimes. For instance, in Mecklenburg, a young lady was assaulted, sexually assaulted by a young man who was arrested by ICE and made bail, even though he had an ICE detainee. He was released and then kidnapped her. ICE then had to go into a 9-hour standoff. When we don't cooperate, not only do we have fentanyl flow into our streets and kill our young people, we have things like that happen. That's one of the biggest issues in Wilson, is our young people are dying every day. Yes. No mother or father should ever have to bury their own child. Ever. And one thing that we have also had very good success with working with is the expansion of healthcare. For instance, Medicaid not only provides for subscriptions, but it also allows those prescriptions to be delivered by Uber or Lyft, so that you don't have to drive 10 or 15 minutes. And that came through the health Medicaid expansion, which I'm proud of.
Mr. Fontenot will also receive our next question. What steps are being taken to ensure election integrity? What steps should be taken? Is there anything that we're not doing that we should do to make sure people can be confident in the election outcomes?
So I would say one of the things I really am looking forward to is I think we will never have a more election with more integrity than this one. And there are a lot of reasons that goes into why I'm secure. First off, we have greater participation from both parties to provide poll observers, poll judges. There's nothing that allows people to feel secure knowing that you have 2 people of opposite views who are looking at the same thing and counting together. Wonderful solution. We're seeing this nationwide. Another one that I think is also a good solution that has really given a lot of confidence in many different places would be voter ID. Some have tried to say that voter ID is racist, yet because there are black people who don't have IDs. You know what I really don't like about that is I almost never hear there are Asians who don't have IDs or whites that don't have IDs. Indians don't have IDs. Somehow it's only black people that don't have IDs. And I don't know who these black people are. Mayor Kathy, or Governor Kathy Hochul of New York said there are black people who never touched a computer. Why is it the people that can't do anything are black? That's racist. Georgia passed a voter ID law and had record level turnout without votes being lost. We have over 100 forms of ID that are acceptable. And just in case you don't have an ID, the Board of Elections will give you one. I think that is giving people a lot of confidence to say that the person that is voting. And then lastly, we're seeing voter rolls actively being struck of those who are dead or no longer living in an area or county. I think those steps have really helped, and I look forward to the 2024 election.
Yay.
Same question for Mr. Pittman. What steps are being taken to ensure election integrity? What steps should be taken?
Well, I just want to say that I want everyone that's eligible to be able to vote. It doesn't matter to me whether you're black, white, Asian, Hispanic, or whatever you may be. We want to make sure that our folks, meaning the entire community, has a chance to vote and is involved in the process. And I would say, I would agree on one step, and that is that I'm looking forward to this election because we've had secure elections. There was just a report that came out last week that said out of 7.7 million people in North Carolina, the number of people that were found that they shouldn't be involved in the process was 9. 9 out of 7.7 million. So we are doing a good job, and we want to make sure that folks at the local and state level are doing what they need to do. I would just say, though, that one of the issues when we're talking about making sure people's voices are heard is gerrymandering. It is beyond time to take away the district pen from legislators. Folks that are running for office should not be the ones drawing their own districts. We have now in a 50-50 state of North Carolina, we see a congressional delegation that will go from 7 to 7, will turn into a 10, 3, and 1 delegation, with the first congressional being the only toss-up. We've seen that in a 50-50 state that we are competing to make sure we don't have a supermajority in both chambers in the state of North Carolina. If folks have confidence in their policies and they trust their record, then why not let independent folks draw the line so that the voters can have their say? It's time to make sure that people in power stop stacking the deck so that they can stay in power.
And Mr. Pittman will also receive our next question. Who should bear the local tax burden? Businesses, individuals, the middle class, the wealthy, senior citizens? And to see how it's written, each word just has a question mark after it, so you can expand on that and maybe like say what proportion of the tax burden should each of these groups face? Businesses, individuals, middle class, the wealthy, and senior citizens.
Well, that person that sent that in is really inquisitive. They want to know on every front where we stand. So let me first start when it comes to businesses. One of the things that I'm passionate about is making sure that we have an environment that is conducive to small businesses. I used to sit on the local Chamber of Commerce, and one of the things we did every month at our monthly meetings is that we looked at the number of businesses that opened and the number that closed, and we talk about how can we make sure we have an environment that is conducive to small business. One of the things that does not include, in my opinion, is making North Carolina go down to a 0% corporate tax rate. That is not fair. When we're talking about fairness and who should bear the burden of taxes, I think the General Assembly has gotten that wrong. When you're talking about major corporations coming to North Carolina and not having to pay anything in taxes, what does that tell the working class? What does that tell seniors that are on a fixed income? What does that tell the small business owner right down the street who is doing everything they can to keep their doors open and to make sure that they are also paying their fair share? So I will tell you right now, there are a bunch of different directions that we can go, but right now we're on the wrong track. We've got to make sure that everyone has skin in the game when it comes to our state system, and we've also got to make sure that we're looking out for middle-class families. I think that also includes bringing back tax-free weekend when it comes to buying your education supplies. I remember that when I was growing up, my mother and I, we would circle that day on the calendar because that was the day we were going to get our school supplies for at least the entire first semester. There's no reason the General Assembly should take that away, and I know that under Governor Josh Stein, that's something that he is calling for, and I will be a vote yes to bring back that tax-free weekend.
And the same question, Mr. Fontenot. Who should bear the local tax burden? Businesses, individuals, the middle class, the wealthy, senior citizens?
Right. So one of the exciting things I would say about North Carolina tax policy is that we are currently at 4.5% individual income tax, which is one of the lowest in the region. And within the next 2 to 3 years, we will actually become one of the next no personal income tax states, following the lines of South Carolina, Florida, and Texas. Because we want to continue to be competitive and allow you to take your money home, recession or no recession. That is on the way. In addition to that, currently North Carolina has a 2.5% corporate income tax rate, not 0, which is why we draw business and continue to be in the top 5 for business growth in the United States, which is why Wilson, as of next week, will have one of the most astronomically large projects ever in our history. I think it will be the largest. And for those that say, well, you know what, let's tax the corporate more. Well, what does that happen? What happens? Well, we can look at California, where everybody's leaving. Apple, Tesla. Apple's building their headquarters where? Raleigh. And where we see tax policy has got to promote innovation, individual prosperity, so that you all can live every day, as well as continue to be competitive, which North Carolina has continued to do. One of the reasons we have an economic surplus, whereas we took over the government in a deficit from our predecessors, is because our tax policy is compelling at an individual and business level. And we send that surplus back to the communities, which is why Wilson got $78 million in a surplus fund.
And Mr. Fontenot will also receive our next question. Do you think Mark Robinson is the answer to move our state forward?
One of the things about the United States that I love is we're not a dictatorship. No one person is going to do anything for our nation, not including myself. I'm part of a team of 120 House representatives and a team of 50 Senate members. We are a team as a nation. And I'm grateful that we're not part of a dictatorship. And I would even say this Messiah complex that one man is going to rise up at the executive level or any level or any woman is nonsense. Yes. As a nation, we have checks and balances. We have an executive, a judiciary, and a legislature for a reason. And when it comes to moving our nation forward, the people who are going to be doing it are in these seats. The most important people in politics are the ones in the communities. Because you are the ones that demand answers, you're the ones that shape policies, engage, and change things. Because that's the way it should be. So the right person to move our nation forward is the people I'm looking at. Because we together are going to change things. As some in this room have, who have changed the lives of young children who now have someplace to go after school. So proud of that program. Or as some in this community who have shared their information through social media. Proud of that as well. Or others in this community who have taken those with no house for the night to hotels or the Durham Rescue Mission. The answer for America is America. And that's who we need to be.
And Mr. Pittman has an opportunity to respond to the same question. Do you think Mark Robinson is the answer to move our state forward?
No.
Oh!
Folks, leadership matters. And to sit here and act like leadership doesn't matter, I can't understand it. This is the entire reason that we have elections. And when you're talking about someone, let me just go through it again. You're talking about someone who is currently the lieutenant governor, who is running to be the face of North Carolina. that has called himself a black Nazi, someone that has said that he wants to own slaves, someone that said some people just need killing, someone that suggested that women just need to close their legs. That does not represent Wilson County's values, and it doesn't represent North Carolina's values.
That's right.
And I think it's completely reasonable to ask folks that are running for a state position who should be the leader of state government. That's not a far-fetched question. And I would ask everyone that is running, whether they're Republican and Democrat, we've been talking about making sure that we're not just following one party line. If there was ever a time to break from your party, it's from a man that went on a transgender pornographic site and called himself a black Nazi. But let me also, real quick, just clarify, just really quickly, that, well, it is allegedly, but he has lost his campaign staff that have resigned.
We do need to have quiet so we can hear the candidates.
So I would just say, sure, you can say allegedly, but half of his lieutenant governor staff has left as of today, half of his campaign staff has left him, and the Republican senior senator from the state of North Carolina, Tom Tillis, has suggested that he's not going to vote for him and Republicans need to move on. I think that's about all the evidence that we need. And I just want to clarify, Corey, that I was not saying that the corporate tax rate was 0% right now. It is 2.5%, but it's set to be 0% by the year 2030. That's a fact.
You'll also receive our next question. Given that 2 in 5 North Carolinians own a firearm, and 1 in 3 of those firearm owners are parents, what is your plan to combat gun violence in our state?
First of all, can I ask that we please, this is supposed to be a forum in which folks can respectfully put their ideas out there. We don't need to treat this like a sports game where we are fighting each other. So if we could please just have decorum, I think that's appropriate for this forum. So, you can, but sir.
This is a debate. No audience advice, please.
Yes.
Yeah, the time is expiring. If this is your candidate, you're taking his speaking time. So let's give the candidates respect and let them speak.
So when it comes to talking about firearms, one of the things that I'll share with you is that I'm a gun owner myself. I remember when my grandfather first gave me my first shotgun, and he told me one of the things that this comes with is an enormous amount of responsibility. I'll also share that as a captain in North Carolina National Guard, we often deal with firearms. But one of the things that I have never overlooked is that when we are dealing with firearms, there are policies and procedures that are in place to make sure that safety is everywhere around us, that people are engaging in a safe manner. So one of the things that I do not agree with that the General Assembly did was their repeal of the pistol permit bill. We have a wonderful sheriff here in Wilson County, Sheriff Calvin Woodard, and there was no need to take away that extra check from him who knows this community better than some folks that are representing other parts of the state. There is no reason for us just to rely on a federal system. We can have someone that grew up here, Calvin Woodard, someone that knows this community, just do one last check to make sure that the person getting that firearm is someone that is going to engage in a safe way to keep our community safe. That's what it's all about. I've always believed and continue to believe that folks have a right to own a firearm. They have a right to protect their home, their property, and their families. But one of the things we have got to do is we have got to make sure that we are keeping policies in place that keep families safe. There is nothing more important to the future of this community.
And so a question for Mr. Fontenot. What is your plan to combat gun violence in our states?
Absolutely. So when it comes to the repeal of the pistol purchase permit,
Laws and the regulations to make it easier for us to have more healthcare options. But the one caveat that I would say is we've got to ensure that we have proper regulations so that people are protected. The one thing that concerns me when we're talking about the healthcare space is that we have far too many times instances where industries are only worried about one thing, and that's profit. The most important thing when it comes to healthcare is people, and is making sure that our people are healthy. So I support reform so long as we make sure we have proper regulations in place so that we don't see the quality of health care decrease. Let's increase the supply and make sure we keep it at a high quality.
The next question also goes to Mr. Pittman. If elected, do you plan to continue funding and support for community programs that were put in place by previous administrations?
Yes, one of the things that I believe that a legislator does is that they advocate for their community. And it doesn't matter who gets the credit at the end of the day. You know, one of the things that I've seen going on in the community is that so many times when we're talking about what funding is what and who did what, people are rushing to take and claim credit. You know, we have good community partners here, whether they are part of local government, whether they're part of our nonprofit sector, and we work together. So whether somebody supported me or not is not one of the things that I'm going to be looking to achieve, or looking to vouch for when I'm trying to get resources from others. One of the things we've got to stay focused on is what is the largest and most pressing need in the community. And so, you know, we do have great county commissioners on both sides of the aisle. Same thing with school board and city council. One of the things that I will continue to do on that I do now while not elected is working with them, communicating with them, because Wilson, again, is a team, and we've got to work together to make sure we get the resources recurring that we need to make sure we are a stronger community.
And Mr. Fontenot, same question. If elected, do you plan to continue funding and support for community programs that were put in place by previous administrations?
Absolutely. One of the examples of that would be Save the Youth. When I was able to help them get a $250,000 directed grant, they had actually just been dropped by a group that kept them very substantially funded. And it was nice to be able to step into that gap. So absolutely, positively. Concerning this, check the record. It's really that simple.
No, that's right.
We'll also receive our next question. This is a combined audience question, two issues dealing with the city of Wilson. What would you do to renovate the parks on the east side? And what are you going to do with the dilapidated houses in Wilson?
So two things. The first is one-time funding. One of the places that I really enjoy getting funding for will be the Reed Street Community Center. I got to go into his gym, and the equipment there was 40, 50 years ago. I looked at the young ladies that were there at the time, and I said, we will get you a new gym. $150,000 later, that bid is going to close this October. They will have a new gym. It begins by showing up, assessing the situation, and going to Raleigh to get the money. That's it. When it comes to dilapidated housing, my opponent is completely correct when he talks about increasing the supply, which is why I had the opportunity to offer a bill that not only increases the supply to housing, but also offers 0% for the first $50,000 for brand new first-time homeowners. So that not only can people own, but they can actually have a stake in the community. When you look at changing communities, even parks, to be better, there's one statistic that bears all, and that is the rental to home ownership ratio. The more rentals you have, the more community is suffering. The more homeowners you have, the more community is prospering. And that was proven true in Brooklyn, New York, where we took that same model and are attempting to pilot it here, where they saw economic, family, and educational revival through home ownership. Yes. One of the most important things, and I'm currently on a bill to do that.
Same question to you. What would you do to renovate the parks on the east side of Wilson, and what would you do with the dilapidated houses in Wilson?
So when it comes to dilapidated houses, Governor Cooper's Office of State and Budget Management has actually formed a plan that calls for millions of dollars to be put into our local governments and communities to make sure that we are revitalizing this housing. And the reason that I support this is because I believe, number one, our local governments know best how to address this problem rather than the state government. But the state government does have a responsibility to make sure it is doing all that it can to address one of the biggest challenges we have, and that is housing. When it comes to our park system, one of the issues that we have here in the city of Wilson, I remember I heard our parks director talk about it quite often, is that we have so many parks in the community that sometimes it is a challenge to get the adequate funding that we need to make sure that they are all brought up to date. And so that's one of the issues I want to work on, is to make sure we continue to get more funding so that every park is of the same standard, no matter whether you're on the west side, the east side, or you're out towards the county. We need to make sure that all of our parks are equal, because that is one of the things that makes a neighborhood. When a parent has somewhere to go and take their children after school, when they have somewhere that is safe, that they know they can look to make sure that exercise is given to the child. That's what makes a home, and it's what makes a neighborhood truly a community.
And we also received our please share 2 to 3 policies that you would implement to improve our community.
Well, one of the things that I've talked about and hit on that I won't revisit is pre-K education. I think it's so important. We've got to make sure we are laser focused on that. Another thing that I think we've got to address that you often don't hear about is that we have got to make sure that we fix the system when it comes to foster care children. As the chair for the Wilson County Department of Social Services, far too often, not only in this county but across the state, we have had children that have had to sleep in the DSS building because we could not find placement. So one of the things that we have got to do, and it needs to be a top priority, is we have got to make sure that we are creating policies that incentivize folks, and that we make sure we have enough funding for beds for level 4, the children that have severe mental issues. Because when you have children that have severe mental health challenges and they are having to stay in a DSS building, it's not adequate when it comes to the education and the health and well-being of the child, and it's not safe for our workers. And I know it's not a flashy topic, but it's important that we address this, because every child matters, whether they are fortunate enough to have a family that they're with or whether they are having to be in the care of the county government. So that is something I'm passionate about. We've got to get to work on it, and we've got to get to work on it soon. Another thing, real quickly, that I will talk about is that I will continue to make sure that we push DOT to have adequate transportation needs addressed. Back in July of 2022, DOT announced that it was going to be completing a study of rail from Raleigh to Greenville with a stop in Wilson County. And I think that would be transformative. They spent $250,000 at the state to study whether that would be a good idea. I can tell them it's a good idea. It would make sure that folks have easy access here, and it's something we've got to push for our community to grow.
Mr. Fontenot, please share 2 to 3 policies that you would implement to improve our community.
Yeah, I would say first off, I think my donor and I are really on the same page here, which is why we got $500,000 from D's House, which is a pre-K program, which is why we expanded Medicaid with $1.8 billion going into our system, and another $600 million going to our system next week when we override Governor Hooper's veto. And then lastly, when it comes to our foster system, Alan Chester authored and passed a bill that does begin substantially changing our foster system to provide more funding for foster parents, quicker access to foster parents, and more care for children. I had the opportunity to vote on that. And yes, DOT, transportation is a problem, which is why we were able to secure $1 million for Sharpsburg to repave a whole subdivision, and that is just beginning.
We've reached our last question of the evening, and since we're wrapping up, we're going to combine the last question with the candidate's closing statement. So you'll each receive the same 2-minute time. I'll ask this brief question, and then you can respond to it and use any remaining time to just deliver your closing message to the audience here this evening. So Mr. Fontenot will receive the question first. Please give examples of how you would handle communication with a constituent whose personal beliefs differ from yours. How would you communicate with a constituent whose beliefs differ from yours?
So, one person that I can give a specific example, and she will tell you herself, so I can use her name, is Yolanda Davis. She told many of my supporters who are here to never talk to me. And so, I walked up to these folks and I said, look man, let's just shake hands. I'm just a regular person. And we talked. When I got in office, she obviously did not vote for me. She worked very hard against me, but I knew about her program. Somebody said, just talk to Kate. She sat down, she showed me what she'd done, and the labor of love she poured into this community was so obvious. I looked at her and said, Ms. Davis, when it comes to my directed grants, you're my number one. I promise you, to the best of my ability, you will get the funding you deserve because of what you've done for this community. And on the day the budget was released, I'll never forget sending her the text message of her line item in the budget and hearing her cry over the phone and say, you know what, Mr. Fontenot, you're a man of principle. You've shown me it's not about party, it's about people. You're living it. And that's what I want to do. It's just that simple. And that would be one of my most vivid examples. It touches me. I was there at her ribbon cutting today. And it just goes to show you what you can do because, look folks, I'll give you a little bit of nugget here. If you're going to be successfully married, let me give you a little bit of advice. You don't make a successful marriage focusing on your differences. You make a successful marriage based on your commonalities. And that is how I approach each of my constituents. We differ in a lot of things, but I'm going to find, to the best of my ability, where we agree, and I'm going to do my best to serve you in that area. It's just that simple. Woo!
We'll ask you the same question, sir. Please provide examples of how you would communicate with a constituent whose personal beliefs differ from yours.
So I'll first say that I appreciate the Wilson Times and the Wilson County Public Library. This has not been an easy thing to put together. I know that we've had spirited discussions and spirited responses, and so thank you all for taking the time and doing this public service. When it comes to constituents that you don't agree with, when you're talking about a district like ours that is 50-50, you can rest assured you're going to run into people that do not agree with you. I think the key to it is going and sitting down at the table and looking for compromise. And doing that here and doing that in Raleigh. Making sure that you do not just vote along party line, but you assess each issue individually and look at what is best for Wilson County. And that's what I'm planning to do, folks, is that if it's good for Wilson County, it will have my support. If it's not good for Wilson County, I will not support it. It's that simple. You know, when we've been talking about these issues, I know that we are having some difficult and tough conversations. We do not have exactly the same vision on how this community is going to grow, but I believe that one of the things that we have seen here tonight is that while this has been a tough conversation, I've tried to be tough but fair. And my pledge to you is that that is the motto I will have as your representative, tough but fair. Tough making sure that we try to claim the resources that we need for this community, making sure that we are compromising across the aisle for common sense legislation, not one side or the other having too much say, but making sure we are fair for all of our citizens. We are going in a good direction when we're talking about this community. There's been a lot of hard work going back years with our city officials, county officials, nonprofits, people that have been working for years and decades. And I'm looking to continue being a part of that team. I've done it before I was elected, and I will continue to do it if elected. So I appreciate all of you being here. Thank you again, and you all have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you to both of our candidates. Thank you to the Wilson County Public Library. Thank you to everyone in the audience.
What would you think of? I saw you last night.
Oh, you were there. It was interesting. It was good to see. Yes, everyone is really friendly. I'm going to send a link to your party chair, and I hope she'll be able to. Out of curiosity, who are you recording for? I'm for Swiss short radio. Give it Andrea? A little bit. Oh, really? Oh, wow! Why are you here? I'm a correspondent in Chicago for Swiss Public Radio. Because North Carolina is very important this time around. Then, are you here? Because I want to try and talk to Mr. Pittman for a second.
Well, I work in communications for the Democratic caucus, so you probably want to be in touch with me.
I'm going to circle back here. This is so interesting. Treats this.
What the hell?